Good evening, all. It's a pleasure to welcome you all for today's dialogue on the next chapter. We are truly fortunate to have gathered a distinguished group of experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience on this table. This discussion will offer invaluable insights into Fontainhas. The Indian Institute of Interior Designers, properly known as IID, was founded in 1972 to establish good professional and trade practices and ethics among its members. Today, with over 8,000 members in 35 chapters and centers across India, IID is true representative of the interior design fraternity within country as well as globally. I, Architect Sumedh Naik, Chairman of IID Goa Center, on behalf of our center, would like you to be comfortable and part of this productive and insightful dialogues. The next chapter is a theme-based dialogues curated by IID related to urban design, planning, architecture, heritage, services, cultural and social parameters of a specific area with all the expertise, stakeholders, and the resident of that area. The idea behind these discussions is to address all issues, understand it, looking for amicable solutions with the help of experts, and we, Triple ID as an institute, will propose this comprehensive report to the government for its implementations. We know it's a long, tiresome process and cannot be achieved in one meeting. But today we are here to identify these issues and we will meet again to have a better report in hand. Today we are here to begin our first dialogue of this chapter and we are talking about our old Latin quarters in Panjim, Fontainhas. Fontainhas, a historic neighborhood in Panjim, Goa, is known for its colonial era architecture and a vibrant culture. However, it faces several challenges, particular as urban development and tourism increases. These key issues related to Fontainhas are preservation of heritage, urbanization and overdevelopment, traffic congestion, tourism, environmental concerns, water management, water and drainage issues, cultural shifts, socio-economic issues, lack of infrastructure are some. Efforts to address these issues involve a balance between preserving the unique charm of Fontainhas while accommodating the need of modern world. Urban planning, heritage conservation, and community involvement are key to ensure that this historic neighborhood remains vibrant and sustainable for future generations. So what's the step forward? What should be public realm spaces we need in these areas? What are the solutions that will be sustainable with respect to tourism? Before we begin, I would like to extend a special thank you to all our panelists for taking their time to share their expertise with us today. Today we have among us a resident, an investor, a conservation architect, a visionary person, urban planner, Panjim's first citizen, and a media personnel. Let me introduce our esteemed panelist. Resident of Southam, being in Goa's tourism industry since 1979, working as CEO specializing in charter and inbound business in Goa, pioneer of spice plantation tourism, passionate about art, architecture, and culture, lately experiencing different perspectives of tourism, presenting before you Mr. Gomes Pereira. So please. Second panelist of the day, investor in Fontainhas, hotelier partner at Welcome Heritage Panjim Inn, Goa's first and only classified heritage hotel, President of Travel and Tourism Association of Goa, ex-secretary Goa Heritage Action Group, interest are heritage and nature. Presenting you Mr. Jack Sukhija. Third panelist for the evening, a conservation architect based in Panjim, knows a lot about Fontainhas, has worked on many award-winning conservation projects, serves on various governmental committees to advise on heritage and conservation issues, conducts heritage walks. Presenting you architect Ketak Nachinolkar. Our fourth panelist, industrialist and chairman of Fomento Group, extensive traveler, visionary person, understands development and tourism to great extent, actively involved in school and higher education, clean drinking water, preventive health care, waste management issues, and so has also helped us to conceptualize this event, presenting you Mr. Auduth Timblo. Our fifth panelist, practicing urban designer and city planner based in Los Angeles, USA, born in Goa, recipient of 2024 John Chase Visionary Award for Excellence in Urban Planning from the American Planning Association. Presenting you architect Vinayak Bharne. The sixth panelist for the evening, first citizen of Panjim city, keen to make Panjim as a model city in terms of development and sustainability. He is one who understands the city as well as people residing in. Presenting you our mayor of Panjim city, Mr. Rohit Monserrate. And the last one, editorial director, Prudent Network, needs no introduction. Everybody has seen him on Head On, the debate, roundtable, and the perfect and the only choice for a moderator, Mr. Pramod Acharya. Welcome you all. As we engage in this dialogue, I encourage you all to think critical, ask questions, and consider how these insights can be applied to all the problems. Due to time constraints, I would request you to kindly write down your questions on a piece of paper and we will circulate it to the moderator. We have a great session planned with a mix of moderated discussions and audience questions. So without further ado, I would turn the floor over to Pramod Acharya, who will be kicking things off. Thank you and look forward for productive and insightful today.
Yeah, thanks, Sumit. सुमेधान म्हणजे काम इतली सोपी केलां की म्हाका चड कांयच त्रास करपाची गरज ना. He explained about the topic, he introduced the panel, and the panel is so esteemed and great that I have to just sit here and listen. So I'll do a very, very simple job today. आणि स्ट्रक्चर इतलेंच सांगता, आमी एक वराचो प्रोग्राम करपा पळयतात. आयडिया इज दॅट फॉर 40 to 45 minutes we'll do with the panel, and then another 15 to 20 minutes we'll open up for the question answer session. आणि जशें तुवें सांगलें की when it comes to Fontainhas, I have to start with Gomes Pereira. We cannot move ahead on this topic without you kicking us off. So on that note, I'll start with a very, very simple question. What are the issues that you want us to debate, deliberate, discuss today? Because before entering this hall, Mayor told me a very, very interesting line. He says, I hope by the end of this discussion, I have some actionable points. So that's the task before us by the first citizen of Panjim. So please, Aluba, tell us what are the issues you want us to deliberate upon. And by the time I reach the end of this panel, I hope we will have those actionable points.
See, the issue about Fontainhas, it's the oldest part of Belgium. It was established around 200 years back. There, there are these houses which are heritage houses, which are on the lanes of, quaint lanes of Belgium. Was not designed for heavy traffic or the kind of tourism we are talking today. It is today the tourism what we are talking is very different from what we had some years back. Tourism is most welcome everywhere. We need tourism. We need commercialization. We need prosperity. Finally, it generates jobs. It creates opportunity to people, our youth, and things like that. But over tourism is something which is dangerous. It can be destructive. It can be polluted. And this is where we have to put our mind to. Do we need this kind of tourism? What kind of tourism that is required for Goa? Not only Fontainhas, but for Goa. Is this the kind of tourism we need? That's the question we have to answer. Just doing tourism for the sake of tourism is not correct. Just doing tourism for the sake of money is not correct. Money is important, prosperity is important, but there has to be restricted. Greed. Now, what has happened here is the greed has taken over. Now, as a resident of Fontainhas, or to say, Fontainhas consists of 4 wards, which is Saint Tomé, Saint Sebastian, Mala, and Portage. I come from Saint Tomé. Now, we grew up there. We were born there. We grew up on those little lanes. What has come today is an invasion to us. We feel threatened. We come back from work. We need peace. There's no peace. There's no tranquility that we were used to. There's noise. There's arrogance of tourists. Today, a tourist, because he has 2 rupees in his pocket, has become arrogant. He has no respect for where he is, for the neighborhood, what the people want. They just do what they want to do. If you come to my house, I refuse to paint it because it's defaced, completely defaced. Why? Because they put their feet on the wall. Would you like your house to be treated that way? I don't think so. Nobody would want to do that. But I asked them one question: would you like your house to be treated? No. Then why are you doing here? This is my question. Now, either we have to educate them or we have to change. People who come to Fontainhas should be interested in culture. Our culture. Our culture is deep-rooted. It's very old culture. It's not of today. Our architecture, maybe 200 years old, but different from the rest of India. Come and admire it. Come and appreciate it. Just don't come for Instagram glory. That 1-minute glory they want. At whose cost? Now that parasitical attitude has to end. And who has to end it? It's the authorities. The authorities have to bring rules, regulations, educate the people, educate the tourists. We want them, but what kind of people? Thank you.
Yeah. I'll straight go to Jack. Jack, usually people on the panel are in double roles. You are in 3 roles today. You are from the conservation point of view, you are there on Goa Heritage Action Group. You are the president of the Travel and Tourism Association of Goa, and you also operate a commercial establishment in Fontainhas. So, how are you looking at this issue? Alova very nicely explained to us what a normal resident of Fontainhas goes through on a day-to-day basis. What do you go through?
No, I think Alu's concerns are very genuine when it comes to over tourism. I think till COVID hit, tourism was not directly in your face. After COVID came in, there was this huge surge of Instagram tourism, and people, they just, Fontainhas just took off. If you see the number of establishments which have come in the last maybe 4 years, it just exploded. And what really, so I walk around a lot in Fontainhas as part of Goa Heritage Action Group. We had started this heritage walks. And when you go on these walks, or when I still walk around, the two things that really strike me straight away is that there's so much of blockage of flow of traffic. There are pedestrians who block the main road. There are four main arteries. There's one main artery, of course, which is the 30th January or the 31st January road. It is blocked at 2 or 3 scenic spots. Then you have the place next to Alu's house, which is Rua Saint-Thomé, or Louis Menezes Road, and 31st January road. So these roads are blocked and it's all in your face. So this is a very genuine problem. At the same time, we have to also acknowledge, like Alu also said, that tourism has been good in some ways for the area. It has seen that buildings are conserved. There's an incentive to keep the heritage going. Otherwise, we are seeing Goa just change into another part of India today. Through the highways, when you just pass through, you can just bypass what is Goa without even touching, without even experiencing what is Goa. So we have to find a balance between tourism and the residents' concerns. There has to be a visitor management system, and this can, I think, be done by slowing the number of cars in Fontainhas. There is a parking lot at the boat cruise jetty. If we can find some way of ensuring that people park there and from there they visit the area, and people who are blocking the streets are immediately told, this is not allowed, then I think some extent of the problems can be solved. Another very pertinent issue, I think, has got to do with education. Now, very often when I walk on the streets, people ask me, "अरे ये म्यूजियम जगह कहाँ है? कौन सा जगह? जैसे अरे वो जो सब पुराने घर है." So I say, ये तो यही है, लेकिन इधर तो लोग रहते हैं. So people think it's like some Hollywood set. There is some Instagram story going around that this is a set where you can do things. So it's very important that you're educated that there are residents living here, that it's a live area, and you have to respect their sentiments when you do it.
केतक बाब तुमच्याकडे येता स्ट्रेट की तुम्ही जेन्ना ह्या गजाली कडेन पळयतात फ्रॉम द कन्जर्वेशन पॉयंट ऑफ व्यू, इट इज आजच तयार जाल्लो काय प्रश्न न्ही, बट डू यू थिंक ओवर अ पिरियड ऑफ टायम हॅव वी पेड एनी कॉन्शियस अटेन्शन towards our conservation areas, including Fontainhas? And I agree with Alubab when he said if we get Fontainhas right, if we succeed in solving the issues in Fontainhas, we may largely be able to solve issues across Goa. Do you think when it comes to Fontainhas specifically and conservation, other conservation spots in Goa in general, we have been paying attention, or we are just going with the flow? We are not planning properly, we are not applying our mind, and now because post-COVID we are facing the brunt of it.
What is actually happening is it's not specifically attention is not being paid to it. There are agencies who have got multiple roles, so there is no dedicated authority, dedicated action. I won't say authority, dedicated society as such, which actually looks after this place, which could actually give proper attention to this place. Somewhere again, rules do matter. Of course, you may have rules, n number of rules, but if nobody follows those rules are useless. But at the same time, there are no rules, and people have some sensibilities also. I think that sensibility has to be inculcated, that this that you need to pay attention to this area. It goes beyond the buildings also onto the streets, what happens in between the buildings and all that also. So there's a larger picture there.
तुम्ही ह्या गजाली कडेन पळयतना, कारण तुमकां सगळो अनुभव आसा, तुमकां टुरिजमाचोय अनुभव आसा, तुमकां सिद्धार्थ गोवा सारक्या येदे व्हडल्या रिसोर्टाचो अनुभव आसा, जंय गोंय दिसता, पावला पावला गोंय दिसता थंय वतकीर, आनी त्याच बरोबर तुमकां पणजेचोय अनुभव आसा. सो ह्या गजालीक आनी बेजिकली तुमचे कडेन सदांच खंयच्याय प्रश्ना खातीर, प्रॉब्लेमा खातीर एक सोल्युशन आसता, विजन आसता. तुमकां ह्या प्रश्नाचेर दिसता विजन काय चडच काचकिसांव दिसता ते?
आणि भरपूर प्रश्न आसात. हो मायनर प्रश्न. ते जर व्हडले प्रश्न गोंयांत सुटना, वॉट यू थिंक यू होप टू सॉल्व दीस प्रॉब्लेम? I know Jack is looking for a solution. Alu is moving around with a stick to tackle this errant tourism. Um, so my focus is not to search for solutions. I have quite a few solutions, but the mayor has to then say, sorry, I won't be able to implement this because there is a government and then there is a chief minister and there's a cabinet, because it is beyond his control. He could not control that massive digging and all the problems in Panjim we faced because he was helpless. Um, a lot of helplessness comes to a lot of us, and we just resign, reconcile to that fate of ours, and says, okay, it moves from one helplessness to the next helplessness. Before I come to Fontainhas, which is really the focus of this gathering here, look at Kalangut, look at Baga. It's a drug belt. At least in Panjim, we are somewhat protected from, safe from that. It's a crime belt. It's a prostitution belt. As you drive there, motorcycles come, Saab chahiye, chahiye. Now, what do I want? He's trying to know what I'm fishing for. So when you look at the whole of Goa, where are we headed? Now, I was quietly enjoying my peaceful life in Dolapola. Now, to get to my house, I have to navigate through so many cars. Why? They are all these, and I'm not against tourism as such because it is a breadwinner for Goa. But the level of tourism is creating more damage for Goa than getting us business and revenue and so forth. So today even Danapaula, I'm afraid, I know because it's closer to my personal being, may turn into a drug belt. I mean, Rohit should take note of this because that was not the Danapaula Talagaon he was born in. That was not the area I came 50 years ago.
Mayor, how are you looking at it? Because you are, as far as Panjim is concerned, it's a completely day job, night job, every job for you. And everybody comes to you looking for a solution. Do you have a solution?
It depends on what
What the problem is?
yeah. No, I mean, see, everyone knows what the problems in Panjim are, so it's very thing. You want to answer the Fontainhas thing? Or?
Yeah. Start with Panjim, you can go to Fontainhas. What are the problems? Why Fontainhas remains a problem?
Or see, Fontainhas now, say for example, whatever everyone said actually is correct. First thing, over tourism is a huge problem. Like every time I need to go to that area to meet people who have issues, it takes me 5 minutes or 10 minutes just to cross those lanes because people are blocking them. We've called the police countless times. One solution that we had provided was to basically, what we wanted to do was to get wardens. Now they've done this successfully in Bali. So what happens is now, what Sir said is correct also. There are certain rules that need to be enforced. Tourists need to know. Tourists need to know that what they're doing is not correct. That they're living in that they're traveling to a residential area, that there are elderly people that live there, people with families, people who want their privacy to be respected. Now, you cannot take your phone and stick it in somebody else's house and then cause an issue with the resident over there. So what we were thinking of is basically, we wanted people to basically, one, enforce correct behavior. There will be no standing in the middle of the streets to take pictures. You will not put your feet up against residents' walls. You will not leave your car in the middle of the road and just leave whenever you want to. That is one of the solutions that we want. See, even in terms of the parking issue that people have said. Now, I remember how long it took me to get that area turned into a non-motorized zone also. It took me around 8 months because no department was willing to get it done. And it was the first time it is done in Goa. So I went from collector's office to police, back to collector's office, back to police again. And I remember each and every time I was fought. They said, we're not giving you a report, we'll give you a negative report, we're not doing it. It's only because collector and me got along well that he bypassed the police and got it done. Even that also took me 8 months. But as far as, see, everything will take time. Now we'll have to handle each and everything as it comes. See, the non-motorized thing is already done. Now it's a question of enforcement. If you ask the tourists, if you ask the police to enforce it, so I'm short of 75 people, I'm short of 45 people, I have to take care of Agazai, full of birthdays and everything, they will give me that same standard excuse. Basically, I will have to stand there every single day and call them every single day to get the thing done. See, I'm not saying, we have issues like this that we're trying to resolve. It will take some time. But if the residents are on board, we are hoping that we can implement a lot of this thing and solve a lot of the issues and everything else.
I think at least Instagram and Instagram tourism was mentioned 2-3 times. So we are going straight to US now. So Vinayak, I am told you had a nice round in Fontainhas today morning. So what are your observations? And you heard all the panelists from your perspective. Where are we going wrong and what can we do?
Well, so first of all, I was just thinking as you all were speaking, isn't it interesting that we're talking about this on the Liberation Day of Goa? I think it's important to take a moment to invoke, the privilege that we're having here, because I think we owe a lot to many people, including my own grandfather who shed blood and was, many of us, many of our relatives. So I think we should take a moment to think about that today. But just a few thoughts about Fontainhas. The first one is, I think it is important to acknowledge that we are building on the efforts in this panel of many people who are not here today, who have done a lot of things in Fontainhas, which is the reason we are even talking about it as a heritage zone. This is not a new discussion. Goa Heritage Action Group, many people have shouted many times about why Fontainhas is special. I think that's number one. And this is important because a lot of the interesting efforts that have pushed Fontainhas towards being noticed as a heritage zone, I would argue, from my perspective, have not happened necessarily through municipal means, but largely through non-municipal means, activists, non-heritage groups, non-government organizations, etc. So the first observation I would like to put forth, and we can talk about this a lot more today, is should the jurisdictional status of Fontainhas be revisited? In other words, rather than thinking of Fontainhas as a place that is managed and purviewed and permitted and administered by the municipality, largely if not fully, should it be a hybrid or completely not even a hybrid, where it is a business improvement district? It is a completely different jurisdictional model that gives it enough autonomy that through the efforts of the investors, through the efforts of residents, through the efforts of all people who are genuinely interested in solving problems there, can they themselves form something that doesn't need to get mangled always with municipal permits, etc., but that they can solve problems in a much more free way. And this is being done in other parts of the world. I'm not talking of global north, even in global south. There are cities that are now doing this. So the first point is, can the legal planning idea of what Fontainhas is change from simply being a heritage zone on a map to something that is much more profound, where people like all of you who are invested in Fontainhas can actually do something about it? That's number one. Number two is design. We all know that tourists come to Fontainhas because they love what they see, in a simple sense. And forget all the Instagram and stuff, it's just a fantastic place. So the question here is, there are three things I would argue that I've observed over the last couple of days of walking there. One is, heritage is not about preserving old buildings only. Heritage is about making sure that new development is respecting something that is tying it to the past. This doesn't have to happen everywhere in Goa, it doesn't have to happen everywhere in Panjim, but if you're calling something a heritage zone, it is not about preserving buildings, it is about acknowledging the fact that a heritage zone will change. Families are growing. If my family grows from 2 people to 5 people, I need a bigger house. It's a reality. But what form that house takes, what form new development takes, is the question at hand. So Ketak should elaborate a lot today on what rules exist in place. But the second observation is, do we have the right instruments in our administrative engine that make sure that we have enough control, not just in FSI and all that. FSI is not the problem. Controlling FSI, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of its character, is the problem. So the second observation is, do we have enough rules, or do we need more rules in a heritage zone to actually safeguard the architectural quality of new development, not old buildings? That's number one. Number two is, there is a lot of damage design damage that was done to Fontainhas before it became a heritage zone. There are a lot of buildings, particularly in the Orin portion or even inside Fontainhas, that were done at a time and by people who were not thinking of Fontainhas as a heritage zone. These are buildings that belong anywhere in Panjim. So there is another scope of work that needs to be done in Fontainhas, which is equally significant, which is about retrofitting. It's almost like interior design in the exterior sense, where you have to keep the buildings, but you have to do something to them so that through facade improvements or facade upgradation or whatever we call it, that the character of the place, the combined character of the place is actually significantly changed. And the third one is, right now, the most beautiful part of Fontainhas is the space between the buildings. Because they're very organic. You know, you go, you terminate, you see these visual vistas. Fontainhas is compact, it's very small, it's manageable, it's not a huge area. So it is conceivable through transportation upgradation, multimodality, everything that Mr. Timblo alluded to, etc. And we should talk about this more, that the space between the buildings of Fontainhas could be rethought. Is it about decongesting Fontainhas? Is it about removing cars completely? Is it about controlling entry points? Is it about allowing, various things? And as a result of this, what is today purely mundane asphalted streets could now become something that is much more unique. Yeah. So I'll stop there, but those are my initial thoughts. But one more point, because I think it's an important observation. This is all good, but this is still not visionary enough for me. This is conventional heritage, solid heritage conservation. But if you want to really take heritage conservation to its absolute cutting edge, I would argue that Fontainhas is part of an ecological zone. You cannot isolate Fontainhas and say that Fontainhas is, X area, it's related to Panjim. So anything we do in Fontainhas will have an impact on Panjim. It is next to a creek. It is next to a series of Kazan lands on which Patwa sits. So, which means that the aquifer under Fontainhas and all the fountains and everything that was the sort of original seed of Fontainhas has to be explored. It may be polluted beyond control. We have not revisited the subject in decades. And we have all the expertise we need in Goa today to talk about it this way as well.
Ketak बाबा तुमच्याकडे येता आणि बरो मुद्दो काढलो की एक्झिस्टिंग रेग्युलेशन्स वेदर दे आर इनफ आणि आमच्याकडे बिल्डिंग कोड आसा बिल्डिंग रेग्युलेशन्स एक्ट आसा पण इज इट इनफ आणि फाल्यां समजा मनीस जर बरो आहा जाल्यार बरो आहा कोण तर मातसो चक्रम मेळ्ळो ताका ते हो जो कूड आसा आमचो रेग्युलेशन्स जी आसा ती आडावपाक शकता काय कितें
No, actually regulation as of now asat, they are general guidelines. Archis असू जाय म्हणतात पण सगळ्याच सिच्युएशन आर्चीज पॉसिबल ना आणि आर्चीज कसली टाईप असतात ताचेरूय अदर लेवल ऑफ हे आसा डिबेट बट इव्हेंच्युअली कितें जाता each building is different, each property is different. You cannot make rules for each and every okay, to some extent you can have, but each place you cannot have specific rules. Finally it has to come from within you actually. What is the use of your education, what is the use of your professionalism and all that. थोडेशे समज थंयच्यानूय येवं जाय की बाबा what is the intention, what you are expected.
किती करचे आणि किती करचे न्ही सगळेच गजाली जर कायद्या घालचे पडल्यो मागीर आमी इतले हय एक गजाल जे क्वेश्चन इज सम डेज बॅक when we were interacting with Suresh Prabhuji, former union minister, he said it's high time we check the carrying capacity of Goa. So in every aspect, he says if we continue the way we are going, we don't even know whether we have already exceeded the carrying capacity. And I think Fontainhas is a classic example of that. So when it comes to something like carrying capacity, how do you think we should measure it? Let's start with Fontainhas only. And how do we regulate it?
Hello. Yeah, so I think carrying capacity is a very interesting concept. There is a professor in GIM called Dr. Sebastian Morris who's talking about, I think he heads the Center of Public Policy. And he says that with intelligent design, and that's something Vinayak also came to a short while back, carrying capacity can be greatly enhanced. I think the issue is not so much with carrying capacity in Fontainhas, it's a flow. When people, just congregate around an area or block it or, do not respect sentiments, then there is there's an issue with that. So one of the ways maybe is to identify which are commercial spots and residential spots and say that, at residential spots, these are the do's and don'ts, these are the do's and don'ts this side. Coming to commercial establishments, I really don't know how you can stop any individual from running a business. If tomorrow you say that, I want to get into business, it's his right. If he has to earn a living. And let's face it, a lot of these houses 30, 40 years had no other source of income. There would today be 20 odd guest houses, which are largely run by families from there who earn small, decent income because of tourism. There would be restaurants which earn decent income, restaurants and houses. So when it comes to carrying capacity, I think if we can get someone to look at the design and try out a number of solutions, I think we'll finally hit a jackpot or sort of what will keep this going. Like Bobby, I think the most important point Bobby mentioned was about the aquifer and the area around it. At high tide, all of us face this problem is that there's seepage up our houses, the walls, and there's water. And I think we have to consider how this drainage also is going out. It's been an issue over 20, I've been there 20, 25 years. My grandparents have been there much longer, were there much longer. So yeah, this has been there for a long time.
अवधूत तुम्ही एक कॅरिंग कॅपॅसिटीची इशू कडेन कशें पळयतात कारण खंयच्याय एरियेची जेन्ना प्लॅनिंग सारकी आसना तेन्ना आमकां कॅपॅसिटी खबर आसना आनी आज आमची परिस्थिती अशी आहा की आमी त्या कॅरिंग कॅपॅसिटीची भायर पावल्यात काय भितर आसा तेच आमकां खबर ना.
Carrying capacity is a little moving target. You cannot say this is it and freeze it for all times to come. When I grew up a little bit in Bombay also, Bombay was just 2 or 3 million people at that time, but now it's 20 million people. It looks overstretched to me because I grew up in that era and a lot of us used to go to Fontainhas. I've been there in the 1950s and 60s. शांत दिसतालें. आतां सगळी गडबड जाल्या आनी आलू स्वच्छ पडटा ती आनीक जकाचे धंद्याक मार बसता. आमी भायले रोहिताक पडून गेला कोण नाल्यार कोण येता आनी सांगता काय अशें कर तशें कर आनी ताज्यान ती सगळें जायन करपाक तरी आसतना तो ट्राय करता. हांव कितें म्हणटा हांव धंद्यांतल्यान आयला हांव गव्हर्मेंट कसो चलोवप हें म्हाका एक्सपिरियन्स ना. हांव ब्युरोक्रेसींतल्यान आयिल्लो ना आनी हांव पॉलिटिक्सांतल्यानय आयिल्लो ना. सपोजींग आय वॉज मेड CEO, answering Bobby's question and Ketak's question also, how do you lay the administrative framework, if at all possible, for Fontainhas? पहिले Fontainhas म्हणजे ते प्रोनाउन्सिएशन बरोबर येवपाक जाय न्ही. तर I would, as a CEO, say, I don't want any cars today. I am now putting electronic gate all across the exit points, because today technology is available for me to do that. But I am going to announce to you in a big place where it says, moment you enter Fontainhas, you have to pay X. Now, I don't know what is that X because we will have to iterate to find out. Like London, if you enter at 5 p.m., the certain electronic tax comes on you. Today, it is possible because Norway has succeeded in this. There is no tax on cars. There is only tax on roads. That means there is a sensor to your car which is connected to the GPS, which road you use, for how long you use, and when you use, you get a bill. If you put your car in the garage, don't use it, there's no bill because you are not using a real estate. Let me tell you, the most expensive real estate is our road. We are ignoring the pricing of that road. If you price that road appropriately because of the technology available to you, the monetization of Fontainhas road spaces is very easily done. Including if Alu wants to own a car within a certain minimum size, he can park it next to his house, but he'll have to pay. Because he's not parking inside his house. He's parking on public property, my property, if I may. You say I'm the CEO. So monetization is the answer to Fontainhas. But how much the police and the collector and all will cooperate with this is burden of mayor, and he will have to solve it because it hasn't been done in Goa. Today, you can price every road in Goa by satellite. The bill will come to your house, that ends the matter. But all cars have taxed, all these things are taxed in a very arbitrary manner. So my first answer as a CEO is monetize Fontainhas. And secondly, develop new areas like Bobby has said, where we can use parking spaces for the residents, not necessarily next to their house and next to the road or on the road, because Alu's great grandfather didn't have a car. There were no cars in Goa. Alu's great grandfather also did not have electricity. There was no electricity in Goa. Maximum people use in Fontainhas was foot, and some of them for transportation of goods was bullock carts. So I would say we need to rethink all these matters because we were not designed for today's times, including for pension.
Anubhav, do you agree with this? Karan, what solutions would you like to see?
Totally in agreement with Mr. Timblo. Okay, what we need is to go back in time. First of all, I want to tell Mr. Timblo, I don't even come home and park my car there. I park it across the river and I walk. That is what we have decided to do. The people who park the cars near our house are the tourists. Rent a car, rent a bike. This has become a nuisance. And I agree with Mr. Timblo, they have to be taxed and taxed heavily. Or we have to find.
It is not tax. It is a toll for you service.
Service.
For
Correct.
using my asset.
The words can be different, but it means
Pay.
pay. At the end of the day, is pay. And I think these people have to pay for the services used. Otherwise, the burden falls on us to pay for their use. Now, this instance of rent a car and rent a bike has become a nuisance in our area. Like Jack said, yes, we need commercialization. And it is semi-commercial area. But my thing is, do not convert residences into commercial. However, the pressure may be there. Because if you don't have residents there, the system will fail. The heritage is over. Because people are the main component of heritage. And there is a lot of conversion going on in Fontainhas right now. A lot of changes happening. What I say is, on conservation area, you cannot change a facade. Do whatever you want with interiors, but do not change the facade. Let it remain the same, as Bobby said. And I appreciate that. And let's conserve the area because it's known for its architecture, its beauty. And some of the things that have come before 1991, before these rules of conservation came, or the basic rules, if you look at it, it's an eyesore. And there's one right in front of my house. It's badly maintained. It become a residence of labor. I call it a labor house. I come to my veranda and look at labor. Is that permissible? That is not acceptable, at least by me. Now, sometimes I say, that building has to be imploded. I'm that drastic. Believe me, it's an ugly, ugly structure. Built before 1991, where rules were not applied. And I'm openly saying this. Mayor may not agree. Architects may not agree, but if architects walk around, they'll see a lot of ugly buildings there. And Bobby said, let's restructure it. Let's redo it up. Let it make it look beautiful. Let there be residents which are well behaved and not ill-treat the area.
Yeah, before I go to Mayor, technology, innovations, and learning from other parts of the world. Can a combination of these three at least lead us towards a solution.
Well, you don't have to learn from other parts of the world. I think the way digitization has changed India is incredible. I mean, I don't think we need to look anywhere else. It's all there. So this is not rocket science as far as I'm concerned. The main point I'm trying to make, we'll talk about other things later, is the big question at hand is, again, I'm going to the administrative part, because if we change the administrative status of Fontainhas, what happens is now we can bring in aspects like security, we can bring in aspects that are far beyond conventional ways of thinking about Fontainhas. And many of the problems that we are facing, residents, tourists not behaving themselves or not under control, etc. I'm not talking of privatizing Fontainhas. That is not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about some degree of control, because it is a heritage zone, because there are problems that are real. The only way to negotiate them is to figure out whether, from a legal perspective, there's another way of tackling it. The other related point that I think Ketak should also talk about is, the reason I brought the question of rules or codes or whatever is because we only write rules to ask the question, how much degree of control do we want? For example, if you're writing a rule for a city that is only FSI and coverage, it's 1 degree of control. It's actually hardly any control, because you're telling a developer, if you have X, you can go X, here's your height, blah, blah, blah. And they can do whatever they want. An architect can do whatever they want. I completely agree. But what happens is, as you get into areas of the city that are sensitive, you have a special area, you have a landmark district, which is valued, which is loved, which is enduring, which has heritage value, or whatever we call it, I would argue that you need greater predictability, not unpredictability, because architects are dangerous. We all think we love doing what we do, and I want Ketak to speak about this. So what I have seen happening in other parts of whatever comparable places is, in certain areas of the city, in certain areas only, could be Church Square, could be Azad Maidan, could be Fontainhas, the degree of predictability of your design is much, much more, because you cannot leave it to the hands of so-called great or not great architects. This cannot be a place where I like it, so I interpret it, and therefore I don't think it's subjective. So you can do it in the rest of the city, but in Fontainhas, I would argue, there needs to be a greater degree of predictability. We are not saying you're going down to the last detail and telling them what to do, but simply saying it's a heritage zone, simply saying you can go 2-story stall, simply saying here's your FSI, here's your coverage, or simply having guidelines that are not binding, to me, is not enough.
It's dangerous. Yeah.
I do agree with. We do need some kind of not detail in depth, but some predictability. Maybe the authorities can think of giving a sort of a map, just saying that match the building lines is not enough. Maybe a possible elevation or something like that. Maybe it can go a little further at some point.
What do you think? This kind of, number one, innovation, technology. Second is the point of predictability, at least in terms of basic design and basic look. At least we know that this is how it should be.
No,
Is it possible administratively?
to retroactively do it? I don't really know. I'll have to check and see if it's possible. Nobody has asked us to.
Can be done through
How?
conservation committee.
Through the means every building will have to be recognized.
Yes.
They have to submit their plans again.
Yes.
But enforceable.
No, we just make the facade drawings. Okay, and you
Means
do
somebody
what.
willingly has to do.
Yes, and whatever you want to do can be done individually.
But they can't be forced.
You can be.
Forced to do it?
Yes, they can be compelled to do.
How?
No, see, there's an extra layer in conservation committee, through the conservation committee, that elevations get approved. Okay, so you subscribe to that.
I'm talking about the finances also.
Mechanism.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, how do you do it?
see, you can advise. Can you point a gun? That's what
No,
he
no,
said.
That is
you
what,
can't-
yeah.
you can't
That
do
is,
that
yeah.
way. But okay,
I will actually tell you, please spend
But
next
one
time.
no, you
minute,
can-
but I think the final bullet is occupancy certificate, occupancy certificate. So if you can tell him, show cause why your occupancy should not be withdrawn,
No.
then it
But occupancy is granted only during a case of, I mean, when you're first
No,
occupied.
first
the
is the
building.
approval.
You
see,
cannot, yeah.
no, for instance, I am not fully aware, but there are a couple of top buildings in the US, in Washington, whose occupancy was withdrawn because they did not meet the indoor air quality
No,
legislation.
at
So if
first
you
level,
fail
sir.
to do a certain thing, you can be like Bombay. A lot of occupancies have been withdrawn because the tanks are not flowing. So there is
No, at first level there is an
occupancy.
approval which is given. So at that approval stage
No,
only.
that's okay, but
For
subsequently
new buildings,
also,
sir. For new buildings.
Yes, for new
No, new
buildings
buildings
no,
I
no,
or any
agree.
for
redevelopment. that
existing
we are doing.
building, you can
Yeah.
withdraw the occupancy, everyone goes home. But then they sit together and say, no, let's repair, let's do this, let's do that. I'm not on the heritage part, but it can also be applicable to heritage part. And this is happening in Switzerland. Most of these top streets, they are 200-year-old. But you go inside a building, it is contemporary, brand new with the
No,
latest.
that the municipality can do through their trade licenses.
But if
or
you're saying the rule
outside.
was changed before 1991, then for me to enforce a rule that
No,
if a building was
today
built
you
before
can make
then-
a rule that you have to.
But through TCP.
No, municipality can do it.
Anyway,
You're talking about a structure that is
Yeah, that is pre-91. I'm talking about that. Yeah.
No, that
That you
comes
cannot do
under-
anything.
it can-
Mayor is talking about a structure that is pre-1991.
No, that depends on what grounds it is, whether it is health or whether it is
Yeah.
on those grounds.
Jack, do you think retrospectively things can be done, or only prospectively we need to look at?
No, I don't. Retrospectively, I really can't see how you will do things done, right? And I mean, some of us can afford to redo the building. A lot of people in that area cannot afford. One of the areas under Smart City, which was taken up for, what do you call that, urban poor, the areas of Mala, which the area, if you go there, the sewage is really horrible if you see the conditions they live in. And that goes up. So I really don't see how retrospectively you do it. Prospectively, you can put, like, if you're coming up with something new, you do things right over there.
Before I open it for the audience,
Can I say one more?
Yeah.
So I think, look, the easiest thing. Let's. I want to clarify a few points so we can open this up. I fully support the idea that Mr. Timblo is proposing here, and that others are agreeing with. I think Fontainhas needs a transportation strategy that should be looked at immediately. Just to put it out there, I think it's a small enough area that it is not out of control yet, in the sense that it's not the whole of Panjim, which is unsolvable, and we need to sit for a year figuring out what this is. I think if a few of us come together, it is possible through collaborative effort to figure out a potential alternative multimodal strategy whereby you can diminish the number of cars that are coming in. It's a visionary idea. I think we should talk about what the challenges will be of that idea, but I think it is conceivable that you can limit the number of cars, you can control the number of cars, you can figure out a completely different way of thinking of the space between the buildings, you can talk about access points in a completely different way, you can rethink what Fontainhas is on an everyday basis. In other words, you're trying to make it more and more pedestrian friendly, and you're trying to make it more and more multimodal, not car dominated. Okay, so that's one action item that I think should be taken up for further discussion, including its challenges. I just want to put that out there.
Rohit, what do you expect? What support do you expect from the people, and what support do you expect from the government to take things ahead?
See, one thing basically is consensus first amongst the residents. The residents themselves should know what they want. You were talking about the idea of putting electronic barriers up. I had met the casino owners and I told them, since you all have caused the problem, you all should take part in basically finding a solution. So they had volunteered to put guards, to put barriers, and all. The residents themselves said no, we don't want it to happen. So until consensus comes forward from the residents themselves, nothing can be done, because you have to take into consideration the business owners, plus the residents, plus different other interests also. If nobody can get together to decide what they themselves want, it's going to be extremely difficult for me to basically get anything done. See, the no more zoo thing was done based on the residents. I told them also to be difficult to enforce it, like it's okay, we'll get it done anyway. So clearly we've told them exactly what is to be done, what's expected. We followed out their requests. But until there is clear consensus with everybody, I am stuck because we've tried. I remember there was one person who went to High Court and almost quashed that whole order. So it just takes one person to disagree and the whole system collapses. So it has to be a consensus amongst everybody first.
Then only things can
Only
move
then
on.
can we move forward.
So that's one, right?
Yeah.
And I totally agree. And I'm happy we are talking about challenges because nothing in life is as simple as saying it's implementable. The second point is about rules because I think this is something that should be done right away because Fontainhas is changing. I saw buildings that are coming up right next to single-story buildings. They're not bad buildings. They're being done pretty sensitively, but we cannot wait for some great architect to come and hope that all architects will behave. So I think, Mr. Mayor, there is a potential, I think, for municipal action here because zoning is a municipal tool, right?
With PDA and
Well, whichever way it is, I think there is a scope where we could revisit. I mean, it's just identifying actionable items where we could revisit what the current rules are and collectively talk about supplementing, not overhauling. We are not saying eliminate the existing rules. We are saying, can we edit? Can we add?
them.
Can we enhance? Yeah, that's all we are saying. Enhance, right? Make it more rigorous so that in the court of law, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. That's why we write rules.
Yeah.
If it exists, then it's there for everyone to scrutinize.
That again is what I'm talking about also. Like, for example, if you're talking about, I totally agree with you. I was talking to TCP about the same thing also. Why why is there standard design? Like when you go to Greece, everything looks exactly the same. It's beautiful. It's nice. Here, a lot of the residents think of their houses as burdens. You're like, it's an expensive house. I have to maintain it. I don't get additional FER. Why am I not allowed to redevelop it? Those are the thoughts that are going through their minds. So it's a very difficult thing when the residents themselves also are like, this is not fair to me. I like what you said is correct. I have a growing family. This is my house. I've lived here all my life. I don't want these rules to be implemented. Again, it's a very difficult thing because half are for, half are for against.
But you're not telling them not to take FAR.
Yeah.
You are just telling them to control the character of the
Yeah.
FAR in the front.
So that I totally agree with. That is
So
correct.
I'm telling you,
I do.
what
It should
I'm
be
pointing
maintained.
out is not a complicated affair. We are
Yeah.
not changing the rule. We are not saying a family shouldn't have a bigger house.
Yeah.
But we are saying when you build a bigger house,
aesthetic.
Maintain the
there,
character.
there has to be something that is about we have to study what
No, I
this
agree
is.
with that. That's
So
totally
it's a
right.
simple
Yeah.
thing. And then so one is about transportation, one is about rules. The third thing, which is even more interesting, is the retrofitting process that I was talking about, which is, I think there is a humongous scope in Fontainhas to take existing buildings that are not very nice and talk not very nice in the sense of heritage compatibility. And
Like to come in on that. There's a hotel called Au Pierre, which was like an ugly building which has been redone. You should take, I think that would be a good model to look.
It's fantastic. So if it's happening, what I'm getting at is what's interesting and exciting to me, Jack, about this is not an effort that should be municipal, in my opinion. This is an effort that should be done in collaboration with residents. So this is what planning is about. Planning is not about a government municipality coming and doing things and residents saying we don't like what you're doing. Planning is about all entities coming together and figuring out concurrent solutions. So we could have one strategy which is about transportation reform for Fontainhas. That's one idea. Who does it, how is one thing. Second, we could talk about a series of rules that supplement existing zoning, not throw it away. We could talk about that. The third one is to work with residents, with investors such as yourself, who have done beautiful work, with Mr. Gomes, all of you, saying, could you talk to your other colleagues who are there? They have buildings, they're not going anywhere. But all we're talking about is bringing in initiatives, public art, maybe the municipality funds it, maybe there are some initiatives so the residents don't feel burdened of spending money. But there are places in the world that through non-municipal initiatives have changed the character of a place for the better. And if Fontainhas is attracting so much, then why not try these things
Yeah.
concurrent?
Before I open it, Alubab, I'll give you the final word. Is the consensus possible? Because Mayor says, if there is consensus, he can move things.
I heard the mayor say, I think people are with whatever we decide. We are in agreement, but let it be decided. And once it's decided, let it be implemented and enforced. Now, the mayor took a lot of trouble of getting no motorized zone. But where is the enforcement? I can't get a parking in front of my house because there's no enforcement. Why there is no enforcement? Because the police is not providing the enough patrolling or anything. The mayor can't go or the municipality can't look into enforcement. Who has to look into enforcement is the police. So there is no enforcement. There's a huge board there by the tourism. Don't do this, do's and don'ts. Are there? Who reads it? Nobody reads. No entry signs are put. Nobody reads. Everybody goes the wrong way. Now, what we need is enforcement more than rules. Rules are there. Enforce it.
You are saying we have a fair bit of idea what to do and what not to do, but we are just not doing
And
it.
we are with the mayor. If he decides to do something, we'll back him up.
You'll be, okay. On that point, I'll open it for the audience. So we have around 15 minutes. We'll take the questions of 15 minutes and then we can conclude. Yeah.
So any guy wanting to ask a question, if you could raise your hand and I'll get the mic to you.
Yeah, hi. I'm willing.
प्रश्न किती आणि तुमचा प्रश्न कोणाक सगळ्याक विचारनाका कोणाक तोय सांगा तर
My question is to the mayor.
आणि तुम्ही कोण आहे
I'm Milind Chankwalkar. I'm a resident, or I've lived there almost for 50 years in Mala, Fontainhas. And right opposite my house now, there is a hotel coming up. People are not aware of what it is. It's a 60-room hotel, 90-room hotel. It's basement plus 3 and a row of buildings coming up like a housing colony. So you are talking about maintaining the character or pre-91. In 2023, there is such a big hotel which is coming up is going to completely change the character of that area. I hope you are aware of that. And
So basically, even in the PDA zone, so there are certain areas that are designated as, not all of Mala and all of these areas are not designated as heritage areas. There is a particular map where certain areas are.
this is a heritage area.
Which one?
Fontainhas Mala area, it's opposite.
No, even within. So not that entire blanket area is not a heritage area. There are certain buildings and certain areas that are not part of
entire
it.
area, it's on the foot of the Altino hill.
Hmm.
It's starting from the road, the narrowest road in Mala.
Hmm.
It's starting from there, it is going up to the foot of Altino.
Yeah.
The whole thing has been leveled, and there are buildings which have already come up.
Yeah.
The question also is about what about, yes, we spoke about the retrofittings and everything. What about the new development that is coming up? How
So that is what a
how
secret-
how the corporation can keep a check on it?
Yeah, the facade you may be.
Yes.
They may do the facade,
Huh.
but a 90-room hotel or a 60-room hotel.
But see,
Will
sir,
change the character of the area.
Change the
Yeah.
But the
character
guide,
of the
so
place.
the guidelines are set by PDA, TCP, and all,
No,
and then later it comes to us finally after thing.
The permission is given by the municipality.
But based on
Approval.
PDA and TCP and everything also, sir. So if they fit by their guidelines, I am nobody to deny permission technically, unless those rules themselves are revised. So it's not a fair assessment to blame the corporation.
No, I'm not blaming the.
No,
I'm just
not, what I
asking
meant
the
is,
question.
yeah. So basically, unless those rules are changed, then I am in a position where I have to, because they will say I have applied by everything else. Why are you not giving me permission? So it becomes a question of that also. So what
Yeah,
Bobby said is
Ketak,
correct.
you want to add to that? Because he's saying that there are multiple agencies involved. If those agencies are giving permission, it is difficult for me to withhold.
Yeah. So yeah.
You are saying a dedicated authority looking after
Yes.
the conservation zones is the only solution.
Yes, one of the solutions.
One of the solutions. Yeah, next question.
Any question?
Hi, this is not for any of the panelists specifically. We have issues all over, on the beach, in towns, and in Fontainhas area also. You have police who are walking the beach to ensure a certain decorum of behavior. Abroad, you have situations like this where you have policing of buildings too in heritage precincts. So I don't know what we are going round and round and discussing all these things when you can form rules and regulations and very strict as facade standardization, like Chandigarh, you have certain standardization. We can do that. And we're on a winning spree. That's my only thought process.
Yeah. as you rightly said, it's not a rocket science. Uh, is this a good starting point? One point that Ketak said is about having a dedicated authority to look after the conservation zone. Is this the second point that we should seriously look at?
Well, I don't know. I think people like Rita and Ketak are in a much better position to gauge what is practical in Goa than me. So I trust them when they say this. My only point is, I think we should take up these initiatives and deliberate and talk about what works. Obviously, nothing is as simple, but it is a small enough area that we could try it as a pilot project. This is my main point. That it is not Panjim. Panjim would be difficult. I wouldn't support doing such a project in Panjim because it is complicated. But I think Fontainhas is small enough that if we try, even if we don't get it 100%, if we have some success, it will bear the promise of a lot of things to come and go.
Yeah, next question.
Good evening, everyone. Mine is not a question, it's just an observation. We used to live in that ugly building that Alu spoke about, bang opposite his house. Believe it or not, we have 2 flats above the flat that we own. Each one has got 30 to 35 migrants staying there. And we had an ugly incident where there was even an assault on my wife some time ago. And of course, the police did nothing about it. So my observation is just the character of the whole area, Santo May Fontainhas, the character is changing, unfortunately. This is what is happening.
Yeah. Yes.
Speaking about OPR, which I have designed, and there are more places also. Now, Bobby spoke about a very good roadmap kind of a thing for this heritage entire area. I think there are challenges, but if you take example of OPR, these things are possible. Of course, subject to the pricing or how much you can afford. I think if government comes into these, maybe support them. I think it's possible. Whatever I think what Bobby says makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
In cases like this, like conservation area, typically they have higher FAR, and then there are restrictions of how much they can build because of the rules which are in place. Now, one way of monetizing is probably also to apply this TDR, because many other states are doing that, and if they can sell that excess FAR in places where it is allowed, but I don't know how that can help people, or is it a good idea to do something like that?
Yeah, yeah, because many, I think from last 4 to 5 years, we are constantly talking about TDRs, but we are not moved ahead on that. And basically, TDR, when I say TDR with respect to conservation zone, otherwise not every land and every green pasture in Goa. So, please.
No, TDR problem is you need areas which can receive that TDR. So somewhere suddenly you're going to see a certain densification. So there are going to be problems there. So it's a total holistic approach that you need to take. And just yes, it can work. It has worked in some places, but then you have to identify those areas.
You have to identify the areas which will receive that TDR. Yeah, you wanted to.
I agree with Ketak on this. I'm skeptical about TDR in general, except in areas where there is very stringent legal reinforcement. The other difficulty with TDR in our areas is TDR requires a much broader look at planning in a much more rigorous way, in a much more regional sense, city sense. You need to know what the receive areas are, what the give areas are, which is not the kind of planning that I see as the dominant trend that is going on here. So I wouldn't encourage TDR as the way to go. What I would like to think about is incentivized FAR planning, which is, the reality is, there is no question that, as I said before, families have to grow. Economic development is a good thing. Fontainhas will never prosper if it does not grow. If investors like Jack, I hope there are many more Jacks, frankly, because we need good economic investment in Fontainhas and areas like Fontainhas. The question is, you're lucky to have someone like him who's sensitive about these things, but we cannot expect everyone, we cannot take a chance that everyone will be as sensitive as Jack. So that is why we safeguard with rules, etc. So I would say FAR is not the problem. And let me explain why. FAR becomes a problem in only two cases. One, where the streets cannot support the infrastructure. When you're raising FAR to such a degree that your sewage and you're just out of control. So obviously, I think there's enough intelligence in Goa to know that when FAR, I like to think there's enough intelligence in Goa that when FAR goes beyond its capacity, either in terms of infrastructure or in terms of form, that buildings are getting way too tall to disrupt the character of a place, I think there are people who will shout. That has been happening. But I also think that we should not be afraid of the word FAR because it has become an unnecessarily, it has become a convenient sort of tarnished word. So I want to say this again today with emphasis. Increasing the density of Fontainhas appropriately, we have to study what that is. Increasing the height of buildings in certain areas appropriately to accommodate more area for families, etc. Appropriately, that's an important word. We have to study what that means, is not the problem. Okay? The problem is, can we reinforce and have in place rules where the massing of the building, the character of the building, the setbacks of the building, the way it meets the ground floor, the way the uses are deliberated, the way the signage is, the way it relates to its neighbor, the way it relates to the opposite side of the street. Can it be incentivized? So for example, can we tell a Fontainhas investor, we can give you an additional floor 30 feet back from the street, but you will have to invest some money to make some paving or something in the public street. You have to invest money in Fontainhas, which is also what I was alluding to when I said the jurisdictional authority of Fontainhas can change, where it could become another kind of entity where developers are now putting in money, but they're also investing in Fontainhas. Rather than focusing on only their buildings, they're doing something more. And these are models. I'm not saying this will work. I'm saying that there are many models that people have tried in different parts of the world, but TDR is not something I would pose as I would remain skeptical of the TDR
about the
model.
TDRs, yeah. So I've been hearing all the panelists talk very nicely. So the thing is, I think the main problem is that the place is good damn beautiful, right? So that's what everybody is, trying to flock there to see it, to enjoy it. There are other places like there's Madani, which happens in, I think, Arpora, that side, Parra, right? So people are flocking there too because it's very, very beautiful. And if the beauty dies down, naturally the demand will also die down. There is no other, explanation to that. Now, if you are only, one sector, like, only the architects talking about it and trying to devise solutions, it will not work. There are many, many different fields which are affected by this. Okay, so I'm also into other fields. So I can talk about something like, demand management, which can happen in that thing. So as Auduth rightly said, that the road is the most important thing that we have. Okay, it can be tax, it can be whatever the words are there. So if we have some system, like even hotels have or airlines have, where we have happy hours or we have, things where the demand can be controlled based on the taxing that you have. So if people are aware that we are going to be taxed heavily during these hours when the peak season is there or the peak time is there, we can control it. So economics of the situation can be altered to bring down the, kind of influx into that area. Okay, so that could be one solution. There are many, many different solutions, but it should be a team of multi, kind of, what do you say? Agencies or things where things are not only, it's a stakeholder management problem also. It's a man-to-man problem. The culture, which is not ours, is coming there and trying to dictate terms to that. So naturally, the people who are there in the residents, they will get, kind of agitated about it. If they are very peaceful, if they respect the people in the place, nobody would come up in arms. Goa is today up in arms because there is an invasion kind of thing which is happening there, right? So culture against culture is hitting us. So unless there is something which kinds of, brings about the solution to this culture to culture, because Delhi culture, whatever is there, is affecting all over India. I have a friend in Dalhousie who's got a house which he rents out, and he knows that once the Delhi customers are there, he has to keep some guys to control them in the night because they go overboard with their enjoyment and those kind of things. So these things are very, it's not like, only the architectural solution or the planning solution which will help us. These are very soft skills. There are things which can go along with these technical skills, technical problems, and try to
a
resolve
combination of both.
Combination, yes.
Yeah, last question.
When we talk about Dr. Gustav's question of 32 people living in one flat. How do we permit that when the flat is given occupancy for 5 people? How do we allow 32 people to live there? And if it is known that 32 people are living there and it's been informed, how do they continue to live there? Number one, because that's what we call carrying capacity. Carrying capacity of the flat is 5 people, not 32. Second thing is, if there is a 60-room hotel coming up in a plot, how does that get permission? For 60 rooms, where does the water come from for the 60 rooms? That's called a question of carrying capacity. So how do we resolve these issues?
Yeah, Ketak. No, I'll go to Mayor from that, yeah.
The tenant verification is supposed to be conducted by all the police. The moment I remember when Dr. Gustav that unfortunate thing happened to his wife, I came with DG and all of the cops were there. We called PSI, PI, everybody. They couldn't find the person, unfortunately. Now, police are supposed to do a tenant verification. The moment there is an issue, we refer it immediately to them. If it's not being done, we can look into it again and check and see whether it's something like this can be prevented from happening again. The building thing is...
Yeah, I'll go to Ketak only because of it. When such things are permitted without understanding, you can call it the carrying capacity of the area. How do we counter that?
No, you need first of all data basically. You need first of all data basically as to what is the occupancy status of these places, how big the houses are, what are the number of people living in each of them. There's a whole data actually which needs to be done, and then of course assess this situation by situation.
Yeah.
So just to say that in a different way, I think what Fontainhas also needs urgently is a much more data-driven, comprehensive understanding of what is going on. I think a lot of everything we spoke about today is largely the easy part, because it's character, as you said, architecture and all that. The easy part. I think the more difficult part is the technical part, which is data-driven, empirical. It's evidence-based. So I think one is the ecological side that I brought up before. I think the second one is looking at the settlement and actually talking about the infrastructural side of it, which is imperative. I think we need to figure out what the capacity is, exactly what Hyacinth is pointing out. One is the amount of people living in an apartment. That is an easy thing to solve because you can either stop them from living, etc. But what's going on below the ground? What actually is the capacity? Yeah. Is it enough? Is the proposed FAR in Fontainhas supportable by that? These kind of questions, I think, should be addressed as part of this initiative. And the other thing I will agree very strongly with what you said is that as part of this, there needs to be a public-private discussion about financing mechanisms, which is really what you were talking about, which is innovative ways of thinking of how economic development can happen through means that are not just linear tourism, but many other ways of thinking of how creative ways of bringing in financing can happen. That's an excellent comment.
Final question.
Yeah, I think I'll take the final question. I'm Siddha Sardesai. This final question would be addressed to Vinayak Bharne. If, as an urban designer, you were asked to relook at Fontainhas, what are the different aspects that you will look at and try to mitigate the problems that have been discussed into this forum?
So I think I would say no planning effort anywhere, whether it's Fontainhas or anyone, can happen with a magic wand. I always say this, and I'm speaking from 30 years of struggling and failing on numerous projects of this kind in other places. I would say, but not all of them have been failures, for the record. That's important too. So just to, I would say the way, like any other place, the way to think about transforming Fontainhas is there are short-term projects which are very easy to implement, tactical, There are midterm projects which will take a little bit of time, and there are long-term projects which may take a lot of expertise, etc. I think what we need is a workshop, a session, or whatever you want to call it, where we identify all of these projects, and they are not architectural alone. Well, some of them may be architectural, some of them may be transportation, some of them may be financing, but we need to make a menu of all the potential strategies related to all the issues we outlined today. And then I think the next step is to figure out which of them are tactical, which of them are short term, which can be done over the next 1 year, which can be done over the next 5 years, which can be done over the next 10 to 15 years. And then the third part, I would argue, is we need to decide which of these projects happen through what means. For example, some projects will absolutely need the cooperation and the participation of Mr. Gomes and Mr. Jack. I mean, they you guys and people like you, the residents, the investors, will be the patrons of these kind of projects. Other projects may be happening through developers that come from the outside, through municipal initiatives. A third one may happen through public-private financing. So the moment we start doing this, I think that is one. But concurrent with that, I think there needs to be a technical effort that should be initiated right away, where we look at Fontainhas much more seriously in terms of its carrying capacity, in terms of what is the infrastructure. This is an engineering thing. This is not something any of us on this panel can, but there is enough expertise in Goa, I think, to really launch this study and figure out so that as we all begin to think of the strategies, that document is available to us that says, here is what the infrastructure is today, here is the proposed FSI, here is what it is, and based on that, we can begin to make decisions of where it goes. So I just want to say this as a sort of a semi-final word. I would say the issue of any planning, particularly in Fontainhas, is not to stop development. It's not to stop the wheels. It's not to scare anybody. It's not to tell developers that we are, at least from my point of view, it's not to tell developers that they're not going to get a chance to do what they want. I think we must allow Fontainhas to continue to flourish for all the right reasons. My pitch today is to make sure that we look at it comprehensively, we look at it empirically, not speculative, based on actual data. And third is we decide how much control we want to exercise in this area because it is such a special area for all of us.
आम्ही इतल्याचेर थांबतात. म्हाका दिसता खुबशे पॉयंट्स आयल्यात आनी बरे पॉयंट्स आयल्यात, तातूंतल्यान आज सुरवात जावपाक शकता.